Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this special event celebrating the virtual premiere of No One Asked You, which we are so proud to host on Jolt.film. My name is Melinda Garcia, and I am a program director here at Jolt, a new online platform that partners with filmmakers to discover and grow audiences for extraordinary new independent films. Just a few quick tips before we get started. Please feel free to use the chat in the Q&A box, which we will be checking throughout the event. As a reminder, we are recording this event, so please keep your camera off if you don't want to be recorded. Here at Jolt, we support the free and open exchange of thoughts and ideas. We are proud to facilitate meaningful conversations around important films and topics. We are also committed to ensuring our events are welcoming, respectful, and provide a safe environment. Please be respectful and note that harassment, hateful, threatening, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. Violations may result in removal from the event. And if you have any technical issues, please message my colleagues Helena and Maxwell. They are here to help. Now, I'm honored to introduce today's panel. I would first like to introduce the award-winning filmmaker behind No One Asked You, Ruth Leitman. Also joining us is Lizz Winstead, the founder of Abortion Access Front. Known for her groundbreaking work as co-creator of The Daily Show, Liz brings her unmatched voice to Abortion Access Front, inspiring and informing audiences nationwide. Our host today is Elizabeth Booker Houston, a public servant dedicated to improving public health by coordinating law, science, and technology. We will also be joined by some very special guests. Margaret Cho, a renowned stand-up comedian, actress, musician, and activist, as well as Greg Proops, celebrated actor, stand-up comedian, and television host. Now, thank you all for joining us today. I will pass it over to Elizabeth to start us off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melinda. Hi, everybody, and welcome. And thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I am very excited to be here. So just to give some background about how I, came to know Ruth and Liz and this amazing film and Abortion Access Front. It was actually, I had to look because it feels like a million years ago. I feel like a lot of time has passed. It was actually just February of this year. Yeah, that was it. February this year. It hasn't even been a year. But it feels like so much has happened since then. And I came out to the Washington, D.C. premiere in Chinatown of No One Asked You. And I got to meet Liz and see this phenomenal documentary, which had me laughing and crying and everything else. And just took me on a whole emotional journey that kind of really gave me some closure to after just watching. I mean, we've seen what has happened with abortion rights, and reading it from a legal perspective, and just as a lawyer, and actually just getting to see the people behind the abortion clinics, getting to see the people behind, say, Jackson Women's Health Organization, getting to see the faces behind the lines and the case that SCOTUS decided to put out there, that nonsense. And we had some good greasy Chinese food after and had a great conversation. And so it was just really, really great to really be a part of that. And so once again, I just thank you guys for inviting me into this space, and Ruth for this amazing film, and Liz for everything that you do for Abortion Access Front. So thank you all so much. And I think we are going to set it up with a clip, right, Ruth? Don't we have something to...
And thank you for being here, and thank you for hosting this, and thank you to the audiences here as well. And yes, we're going to see a clip that starts out with, so right after Kennedy retired, left the bench, and goes into the Golden Probe Awards, which Liz and the team every election year would do a variety show to really teach and show people in states just who they were going to be voting for or not voting for. And it was amazing because Margaret Cho was the host of the awards that night in 2018.
It was so fun. It was so great.
Are we going to see the clip or talk about the thing and then see the clip?
The clip.
Hey everybody, it's Liz here, and welcome to this special edition of the Feminist Sleeper Cell. Before our terrifying announcement of who Trump has decided should replace Kennedy for the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. This guy, this year, he wrote the dissenting opinion in the DC circuit to not have an undocumented minor be able to access her right to an abortion. A lot to think about on this not Independence Day weekend. Maybe get really smashed this weekend, knowing that come Monday, the fight's going to continue.
Welcome to the 2018 Golden Probe Awards. We're so happy you are with us for sexism's most glamorous night. We will be honoring the achievements of men who work tirelessly making the world an even better place for them.
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I think Brett needs a drink.
Oh, nah. Here you go, Brett. But I do feel like we're getting louder. Oh, he needs beer. We need to get beer for him. Thirsty.
1, 2, 3. Expose
People are reaching out to us for bigger, specific help. We're just growing into whatever space needs to be filled.
I love it. I hate it and I love it. I hate what the subject matter is, but I love you guys and I love that documentary. And so I just wanted to kick it off with the first question is just Margaret, Liz, how did you guys get to know each other?
Do you remember, Margaret?
Well, I've known Liz since the 80s, since just from stand-up comedy and like San Francisco. So we're from the same place, as is Greg Proops. And so we're all like from that era. And I think, we just were there doing comedy.
But do you remember you and I got booked at this terrible college gig someplace, I don't remember where, and we spent money renting porn on the TV. I don't remember.
Why don't I remember that? That's like, so I wish what did we get? What did we get to
I
watch?
don't remember, but it was like I think we were both sort of traumatized because it was like one of those like Chico State kind of gig. We're in California. And we were there together and we had done a bunch of stuff, little shows here and there, but it was the first time that we ever got booked on a show like together. And then we just it was really fun. I just remember that part. It was really fun.
Yeah.
And we've just always been kindred in our feminism and righteous activism around all things. And I think also it was really nice to meet Ian Harvey and be reconnected that way. And then Margaret's manager is partners with Ian Harvey. So we got to dovetail together again and have remained in communication kind of for the past 5 years, really just in the fight. And also because I torture all of the people I love with helping me do work for Abortion Access Front. Because
it's so good. We have to work for this.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, for people who haven't seen the film, that was a little taste of a lot of weird stuff that we do. And the show that Margaret hosted, Ruth kind of alluded to it, but we were desperately trying to figure out a way for people to understand that these laws are coming out of states, and that's where it's all sort of spiraling from. You don't live in Mississippi, maybe, but it's a law from Mississippi that ended abortion as we know it in the United States. And so we thought if we took and satirized an award show, and instead of showing clips of the movie, we would show clips of what these horrible politicians would say. And then we used the categories, we used all the conventions of an award show. And so when you have 7 categories and 5 people in each category, that's 35 people that you're introducing people to. And when you shove that much information into somebody's world, they don't look at it as an anomaly or even a pattern. They look at it as a foundational problem. And that's what we wanted to do by doing it all in one night and then doing it in a funny way.
Yeah, I think you guys have been really successful with that. And I just, you talked about being kindred spirits for all things feminism, all things abortion rights. And Margaret, what drew you? Is that what drew you to Abortion Access Front and just the work with AAF?
Absolutely. And what Liz has been doing is showing that it's like when they say, well, let's leave it up to the states, as if that's like a way to be, that's another, like, oh, it's just about freedom. No, it's a coordinated attack on women's rights. When you say we're leaving it with the states, it's just showing they're actually distracting us all from this idea that they're not all coming for our rights at the same time. And to be able to educate people through comedy is what's so genius about what Liz is doing, because you're able to get all of this information. And because people don't want to know about states politics, people just are so bored with it. And but you do it with comedy, and that really wakes people up to the problem, also gets people going. It's really important.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually, because you put a lot of social issues and politics into your comedy, into the comedic work that you do, and it often helps with talking about things that are hard, that are scary. And I just wonder, why do you think that comedy is so ripe for talking about these issues? And going forward now, do you still see that comedy has a place for talking about these issues?
Oh yeah, it's the best. It's best. And comedy has always been progressive. That's why the guys on the right are not funny. That's why you don't ever want to like they think they want like these Jesse Walders or Gutfield or whatever those guys are doing. Glenn Beck. It's never funny, but they wish they were, because they're just not on the right side. I've never ever found anybody on the right funny. It no matter how I try. It's just because the spirit of comedy is to make fun of authority. It's to buck authority. It's to make fun of the establishment. It's to hold them accountable. And that's why the right can't meme, they can't satire, they can't do it. It's just not good.
It's
No.
true. And I also feel too that just to your point, Margaret, to sort of create this woke culture problem that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Instead of they're mad they can't make fun of people who are on the margins, and instead I've never heard them with their hot takes on how corporate greed is destroying America, how cops are overusing their authority. It's like, it's not brave to joke about trans people. It's gross, when it really would be brave to come out against the power structures who are really harming us. That to me is the edge. And when I hear constantly right-wing comics will say things like, and Greg Proops, who will be on in a minute, I was on this show called The Green Room one time and was totally attacked by Colin Quinn and by Bill Burr because I dare say, like, what Michael Richards did on stage did not have comedy in it. It was just a hateful screed. And they were literally saying, comedians should get a break because of intention. And I go, no, the part of comedy that's the most interesting to me is walking to the edge and saying it. And then, you know what? You might offend people. Either defend it or back off and realize that you said something shitty. But they want it both ways.
We cut that out of the film because that took too long. Those guys, crazy.
Look, maybe now they'll shut up because Kendrick Lamar came for their throats on his last track. I don't know if y'all saw that,
That's
but he said don't let no white comedian talk about no black woman, that's law. And everybody's like, oh, because
So
we saw what
good.
he did to Drake.
So good. It's so good.
So, Margaret, I know we're winding down, and I know you have to hop off soon, but I just wanted to ask one final question, because comedy is also about bringing laughter and joy. And I just want to know, especially given everything going on, what's bringing you joy right now? I want to hear from you. I want to hear from Liz. I want to hear from Ruth, but starting with you, Margaret, what's bringing you joy right now?
The cabinet nominations, like how stupid, how gross Congress is with like Nancy Mace and who's not part of the cabinet nominations, but she's sort of like been in the news this week for like trying to make outlaw trans women in the bathrooms, and Pete Hegseth, who's like going to be like Secretary of Defense, who's never washed his hands. So like making the joke of like, I hope that she gets fingered by Pete Hegseth and comes down with the most antibiotic resistant urinary tract infection ever been experienced, and that she will always wipe back to front. So those are the things that are giving me joy. You have to laugh at it, because if you don't, you'll cry and
Margaret,
just die.
I think you need to call it Hegseth C.
That's
Egg C.
perfect.
Egg C.
Egg C. Thank you. That's my tag.
Take it.
Perfect.
I love it. That gave me joy right there. What's bringing you joy right now?
You know, this is gonna sound all woo or whatever, but knowing that this is gonna blow everybody away, but this is our 10th anniversary of having Abortion Access Front. And so knowing that we have a foundation and a structure and a strategy to fight all this shit that's going to happen, and that we've been there before. We've been there through like the first Trump, we've been there through COVID, we were there through the end of Roe, and created some of our best programmatic work and our most effective strategies fighting back. That for me, knowing that I have that place to do it myself and to offer for people to like, come get your freak on with us, because we know all of the avenues that they have and how they can try to screw us. And we're about 75% of knowing the ways and how we're going to fight back on it. The other 25% is a mystery, but I do feel good about that. So that's bringing me joy. Also, I just watched The Diplomat and I really like it.
Oh,
I
that's
really liked it. There.
Ruth, what about you?
well, this Zoom room and comedy, because I needed Liz and AAF when Trump was elected the first time. So I feel like this is ripe for amazing comedy that's going to follow this, because I mean, it is just like you said earlier, it is like the comics hold these shitheads accountable. And I think that's what's going to happen. And Liz, you said a long time ago, and it came up so much during the making of the film and being around you and interviewing, like everybody was always looking to the comics, because the comics were making sense of the things that the people who should have been were not, people in the media, the other politicians. So you were bringing real truths and greater truths to what was really happening. And that, there's going to be a whole lot of truth bombs happening in the next year. So
Love
that-
it.
joy. Also, Jolt brings me joy because the film business is in the garbage, and Jolt brings films to audiences who really need to see them, who don't want the status quo. So we're really excited that we were able to be on this platform so quickly. So we're really excited about that.
I love that. Well, thank you all for your answers. And Margaret, thank you so much. I know you do have to hop off, but
Thank
we appreciate you. And
Margaret.
Thank you.
We'll be in
Thank
keep
touch,
doing what you're
Margaret. We
doing.
have some stuff
Thank
to
you.
do.
I know. Love you.
Love
Bye.
you.
You.
All right. So just getting into the next section here, because we're already talking about comedy and how important it is. Ruth, what you said is so true about the way that comedians just really shine a light on what's going on in the most honest way, in a raw way. I want to ask you, Liz, why are comedians such an important part of our culture? And when it comes to especially just calling out all of the bullshit.
Comedy done well will call out everybody who screws up, whether it's for evil or just for screwing up. And so good comedy, and I think Margaret and Greg, who we're going to talk to in a minute, you become a reliable narrator. And so I think that part is incredibly important. And the backstage is always the best place to be, right? We were talking about like all the hot takes that have been happening around Kamala, why did Kamala lose, blah blah blah. And the one thing I will say unequivocally in my hot take is, since the Daily Show launched, the media never got the message that, hey, you're fucking up. We exist because you aren't doing your jobs, right? And instead, they were like, oh, the public wants funny chyrons? We'll do that. It was like, no, please be news people. And so when Trump was out there 24/7, 365 with windmills and bacon and all that shit, and the media wasn't covering the fact that Fox News was sane washing Trump and showing and not explaining about that tariffs are terrible, and not explaining that undocumented people pay so much billions of dollars into the system and never get it back. Instead, they were doing the job that we were all doing and not educating. So we were trying to do both. So I think that, you know, the biggest tell is when Jon Stewart quit The Daily Show the first time, and people were like, how dare you quit? This is a nightmare. This is horrible. What are we going to do? Instead of holding the media accountable for not being good at being journalists, that should tell you everything of how people feel about comics. Also, and I'll stop and I'll turn it over to y'all, because Elizabeth, you also, if you don't know, if you just know Elizabeth from TikTok and you've never seen Elizabeth do stand up, do yourself a favor. Brilliant comedian. But when you stand on stage, and I started joking the minute after the election because I needed to tap into people, because I firmly believe the barometer is if you can make somebody laugh in times that are tragic, they haven't given up hope. And it is something that we need to do often to remind people that they're still alive, that they still experience joy. And every time they can experience joy, it brings them back from the precipice and into the fight.
I agree with that. And also thank you for the compliment. That was real sweet. Because yeah, I toured during the month of October, and with my finale of my tour being in DC the night before the election. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Being able to make people laugh in that moment, that tense moment, and I'm gonna be back at DC Improv next week, so hell, hopefully I make them laugh there too. Is, you know, after the fact. You know, just it really does show that there is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And what you're saying about traditional media, look, as a content creator, me and traditional media, we've had it out because they do not like us. But I knew there was a problem when people were telling me they came to my account to get their news before anywhere else, and half of those people didn't know I was a lawyer. They just thought I was a comedian telling them stuff, and I'm like, okay, this tells you that the media ecosystem definitely needs we'll see if they figure it out next time next time around. But Ruth, I just want to shift over to talking about the film a little bit more, because it's been called a tragic comedy political film that really highlights history, and it's woven all throughout. And I just want to know, how did you weave together comedy, dramatic, and historical elements and put all that together to get the narrative going? Because again, I cannot stress how well you did that. I just again think about when I was watching the film in DC earlier this year, and just again laughing, crying, all of the emotions. How did you manage to weave all of that together?
Well, I mean, obviously the issue was really important to me, and I really wanted to make a film that, you know, hit the right tone. So many abortion documentaries are really sad, and this is sad in its own way. It has its sad moments for sure, because there were a lot of sad things that happened. But I think that, you know, the worse things got, the more that comedy needed to be, you know, we needed to have the juxtaposition of comedy next to those really difficult things. And I think it was one of those things where we were just sort of bringing together a lot of different kinds of media. And I find documentary filmmaking to the structure of documentary filmmaking to be really exciting and really challenging in the hunter-gatherer kind of way. And we had so much at our disposal. You know, obviously Liz had so much of a history making media, creating media, critiquing media. And so that was really important. But we couldn't, you know, we couldn't forget, and we needed to really include, you know, the timestamp of what was happening in the timeline of what was happening over the last 7 years. And so, you know, it was, you know, a really great challenge, an exciting challenge to be able to bring all of those things together and to have the emotional connection that people would have with Liz, with AAF, with the comics. And one of the things that I think really, you know, blew me away the most in doing this and making this was watching the comics escort at clinics, going to a clinic for the first time, meeting providers for the first time, And there was this really awesome exchange of like, you know, the people who worked in the clinics. We're going to see a scene from the Pink House in a minute, but the providers meeting the comics and feeling like, wow, these are the stars. And it was like, no. The comics were so gracious and so loving and so, you know, in awe of what the clinic staff and the clinic workers were doing and the volunteers were doing, that there, you know, it wasn't a mutual admiration society. It was really like understanding the real deal and what really mattered. And just watching Ian or watching Greg meet them for the first time, that was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And so it was really important for the audience to be able to see that and to, you know, it's not a heavily interviewee kind of film. It's really like it throws you into what it feels like to be outside of the clinic.
Yeah, and I that really, thank you for that. That encapsulates so much of what had me in awe watching it, and why I tell everybody to please see it. And so, speaking of seeing it, do you want to go ahead and set up that next clip for us where you're talking about the Pink House, which this blew my mind because being in Memphis, I'm like, that has been basically in my backyard all this time, and I had no idea about the history. So if you want to set that clip up for us.
Sure. So Jackson Women's Health Organization was the last remaining clinic in the state of Mississippi before Dobbs. And so we go there on the Vaginal Ministry tour with Liz. Liz had been there for two or 3 years before that. And so this was like the second stop on the tour. And on that stop, Helen Hong was there, Joyelle was there, AAF, Liz was there, Ian Harvey, and Greg Proops. And so this was our first stop at the Pink House, which we follow over the 6 years. And we see the clip.
You support abortion, is what you're saying.
support abortion.
You do understand that's the killing of a child. You agree
Actually,
that
I don't understand that.
all the people I've met that support abortion are already living.
Yes. Turns out people who support abortion are alive.
You believe your life is more valuable than other people's.
No, you're putting words
That's
in
the
my
same
mouth.
thing in slavery. That was the same thing.
Oh, you guys love bringing up slavery. Adam gave me a pamphlet, and since I am black, I would go to the section that says Planned Parenthood and the Negro Project.
There are no babies to adopt.
Why aren't there any babies to
Because
adopt?
they're being killed here.
There are plenty of babies still to be adopted.
there's not.
That terrifying large picture is actually this big, from here to here.
Are you a pro-death penalty as well?
Oh, absolutely.
The 20% of the women who are in the Congress come up with a Dickless Tuesday bill. If men got pregnant, you'd be in and out in 5 minutes like fucking Jiffy Lube.
Love that so much. Thank you, Ruth, for setting that up. And so, hey, since we're seeing Greg Proops, Greg, ready to bring you on because I love, first of all, seeing a white cis man in this space and telling jokes like that. So Greg, welcome. How you doing?
I'm good, Elizabeth. I've been watching the show and I agree with almost everything you guys have said, particularly about comedy. The thing that kills me about all the right-wing guys saying that they're not allowed to be, they're being trammeled and woke is keeping them from saying what they want to say is that they're dominating the airwaves, and they certainly had an undue media effect on the election. Whether it was an actual effect, I think, is remains that. But and so everybody's always a victim, and that is what when straight white guys cast themselves as victims, it's the most obviously fallacious thing in the world, but also the most nauseating thing in the world, and that's. I think part of what this continuing trauma is having to watch this go on, because it's going to be 4 years of white guys going, man, we're finally getting the night back. and then they won't know what to do with it, basically, I think.
Well, Greg, I also wonder too, because I've never had the opportunity. Well, I tried on that fateful night in Canada when we were all there, but it's kind of like when they scream about how they can't say what they want to say anymore. Like, what is it that you can't say? Like, I'm curious if you know, is it, what would you say? Would you just be walking around screaming the N-word? Would you just be like advocating for rape? Like, what is it that you have been banned from saying? Because you can say it, you're just mad that people don't want to hear it, or that people that you think are fun like us are like, we don't want you around anymore. Like, I don't know what their problem is, honestly.
No, I think that's it. I think it really boils down to they're desperate to say it, and it's not a deeply held belief. They're just clowns, and they want to be able to say something awful. And now we've come all the way back around to like when you and I first started, Liz, and I hate lumping you into this, but right after World War II, when we got into comedy, that there was so many sexist guys. I mean, like comedy, that's all it was. And it was, and I'm from San Francisco, and I felt this way. Where Robin was our, you know, as Warren Thomas once said, where Robin Williams was our Elvis. And Robin was enlightened and actually sensitive, even though he did a dazzling variety of stereotypical caricatures. He was also not a terrible sexist homophobic person. There were so many comics that it was Chinese drivers and My Girlfriend's So Fat. And that's what the early 80s were all about. And like, to see it come back around and be paid for it and then have them complain that they can't say what they want to say. And I think Lenny Bruce went to jail, and George Carlin went to jail, and Richard Pryor went to jail. And strangely, all three of them had something very humanist to say about society, which is where I'm coming from as a comedian. That's what I admire. Lily Tomlin, Margaret Cho, you know, I want to hear about what's happening. I don't want to hear, if I could only be a more awful human being, I could really, you know, strike a blow for freedom. Because that's kind of, you know, when people are homophobic there or anti-choice, they always come on some moral jazz. And it's like, it doesn't make you moral, it just makes you an awful human being.
That is,
I mean,
so accurate.
You know, I'm racist, but it's just, you know, the way I was raised. Well, then you were raised as a jerk.
Yes.
You know, own it, own it. This is my family, you know, listening to them, you know. Oh my God, fentanyl's the problem. With whom? You know, like it's not happening to you. You know, when we were in Wisconsin ever so recently, they were complaining, the right wingers there, about the border crisis. And I'm like, well,
the Canadian border? The Michigan
right?
border?
That's what I was gonna say. Like, the only crisis at the border is that there's geese everywhere, and they're you know, they're messy and they're loud. I mean, the pretend platform that the conservative white Republican Party has come up with, where trans people are disturbing they're being, first of all, children are going to school and turning into a different gender by the time they come home. All these fictional things. And it's, of course, to avoid the reality that they can't do anything for anyone because they have no plans to do anything for anyone. It's much like, and I'm sure you guys will all agree, dating a straight white guy. They're never thinking about you or anyone else or anything in the world except for betting on football and what's going to happen to their penis eventually.
Yeah.
See, that's why my emotional support white boy, aka my husband, is well trained. Yeah,
we have to be. Unlike pigs, we can be trained to pick out good shoes and stuff. We can order a bottle of wine. There's a lot of things men can do if you train them to do it.
They learn it. But I just, oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, like, okay, I feel like you didn't need a lot of convincing, but how did Liz convince you or get you involved in the Vagical Mystery Tour? Because,
well, just to stop one, be that my wife comes with me in all these things too, Jennifer. And one of our first dates, she recalled to me, was that I took her to a pro-choice meeting in San Francisco. And there was an anti-choice guy outside. And by the way, we hadn't been dating much, although we knew each other. And he got in our face, and I actually physically threatened him, which, if you know me, is pretty close to lunacy on my part. I'm absolutely live and die by the beauty of my looks. And so to put that in danger at any point. I was doing a podcast in Chicago at this really hip, I don't know if it's there anymore, called The Up or something. It used to be like, and where Second City was. And a person handed me a pamphlet, And on that pamphlet, it said, Lizz Winstead's doing a bus tour of all these abortion clinics. And I was like, I know Lizz Winstead. And so it started there. That's when I got hip to her, what she was doing. I mentioned it on the podcast. And then I actually don't remember if you contacted me or I contacted you, but the next thing I knew, oh, there you are. So because I got so excited that she was going and doing something that I felt concrete, not a lot of give gab about we're gonna have a meeting or we're gonna make a fucking petition or whatever, but going to the clinics and providing them with food, whatnot, help, resources, whatever it is. At the very least, distracting them for a day from the horror of their general and showing that there's some allyship in the world appealed to me more than anything. And I thought, well, there is someone who's actually doing something that's on the ground. And no, it doesn't change Congress' mind. No, it doesn't keep people off Supreme Courts. It's way more personal than that. And that's where all politics begins. The women of West Virginia need toothbrushes and tampons. The women of Mississippi that we met, we brought toys and a box of condoms, and the condoms were going like that. So then you knew exactly what it is they really need. They don't need a sermon, and they don't need a check. They need a box of fucking condoms so they don't get pregnant. And it's so basic and so doable, but it has to start somewhere. So that was how I got all sexed up about it.
Well, I also want to say too, the thing that was so cool, Greg, is like you were sort of like I was 3 years before the tour started, where you were super well informed on the issue, but until you got into the on the ground and really understood from the providers and saw like what the shit really was, could you understand? And your podcast, you did a podcast from there and about that. And I think that was one of the people were profoundly like, you just opened up so many eyes because you kind of think, and then realizing also just doing what we do and doing it on the ground. Like there's very few people who even work in the abortion rights space who've been in a clinic, who've visited clinics. So they're working philosophically, creating laws, like a lot of political consultants, party politic people who told us forever. And I cannot tell you how many calls I got from like people saying, what you're doing is just amplifying the anti-abortion movement. I was like, no, I'm actually letting people know what the fight is and who the people are. If you say abortion, it's alienating people. And I was like, every step of the way, I was just like, thank you for your unsolicited input, and have a good day. Because I feel like that's not true, because I'm in rooms where hundreds of people are, and I'm changing their minds, and they're signing up, and they're committing themselves to being part of the community that this clinic is in and to help them. So you've never been to a clinic. You're telling me from your McKinsey, whatever the hell thing, that you've done some studies of people who don't actually want to talk about abortion because they've been told they shouldn't. And then you come back with false data. So no, thank you. Not interested.
Yep. Just got to push them to the side, because I mean, we even see it with just this election, the way that even though there were a bunch of women who voted for Trump, but the way they also voted for abortion rights on state ballots, right? Yeah. We're seeing that crossover. And I think that when you talk about like saying the word abortion, you talk about the discomfort people have with certain words, it kind of goes back to the way comedy can weave all of that in there and bring people into that discomfort in a way that makes it more palatable. And so, Ruth, I just wonder, like, we see it in the clip from the documentary, but why did you want to include comics like Greg encountering the anti-abortion people, not just showing things like from the show and like the performance, but we saw Greg in that clip, telling the guy like, hey, you're against the death penalty though, right? So what made you want to include that?
Well, I think a lot of it is just like allowing people just enough time to show the audience who they really are. And that's really what happens. And honestly, we have the funniest comics in this film, And some of the funniest moments actually happen from the antis themselves, because they are a gift that keeps on giving in terms of that. I mean, it's really, they, we were really careful about not to give them too much time, because that's really important. But no, I mean, seeing you interviewing them that at the Pink House, and actually speaking of Jennifer has one of the funniest lines in the film, because she's like, you could be somewhere else.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was amazing. But also,
because I think that interaction brings together a lot of really important comedy that you wouldn't see otherwise, that they're not challenged in that way. They're challenged by other people, but they're not often challenged by comics. And I think that's really exciting.
Well, I also want to say too that they were fans of Greg. Like, to have, they were fans of Whose Line, and they were fans of Greg. And so, like, when you see somebody whose work you love, especially when that work is bringing you joy, confronting your bullshit, that was a lot for them.
That brought a lot of conflict in their lives. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
It was so golden for me, because once I knew that they were Whose Line fans, and I said to Jennifer too, and Liz, of course, on the day, I spoke to them in a low tone, like you would train a spaniel. And when you come at men that way and never contest them, they'll tell you everything, because they're bursting inside to share emotionally with anyone. And because I'm a TV friend, they literally hung themselves on in everything we said. And I did not have to goad them, nor did I raise my voice at any point. Jennifer went, you could be somewhere else. She was the one that was acting as the that agent. But like, a lot of white dudes were listening to my show at that point, and it was a real revelation for them. And that's why I was real proud to be able to put that one out, because we talked to Shannon Brewer, who ran the Pink House. We talked to all the women and people who were working there. Ian, everybody's in it. And it kind of hipped people to what the scene was. And then, of course, the significance of it being absolutely the bloody linchpin upon which they've removed Roe, it's Dobbs and all that. And it was all over the Pink House. So, and that's the trick, is this whole election was about information in a way, and how people absorb it. And I think that making it, my wife always says to me, why don't you try to make it a little more palatable, instead of being so horribly strident and hideous about everything you say. So I'm learning that lesson all the time, because I'm always on white people. And she's like, you really need to back off on that for a minute. I go, but now's the time. And she's like, yeah, but what if you made it funnier?
That is always the it's just, I don't know, from my standpoint, it's
White
always
guys
funny
really
to just
hate to be called
make
out.
fun of them.
They
But
really do.
they hate to, they don't appreciate the humor in it. I do. I don't know. But but that kind of leads into my next question for you, though. And I just love that you had fans there, which I get it. Whose Line is amazing. We used to play Whose Line Is It Anyway when I was in middle school at my birthday parties, and I would be Drew Carey. But anyhow.
Awesome. I'll tell him that.
Please do. But I just want to know, like, why do you think it's so important for men specifically to be involved? And you touched on this a little bit in different ways, but just why do you think it's so important for men specifically to be involved in this movement?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's that Yiddish expression, being a mensch, which just means being a human being. And part of being a human being is acknowledging that there's, other genders, and one of them is women. And that maybe they could use some help from time to time, and that however much privilege you have, kind of your responsibility. If I understand manliness and manhood properly, part of it was you're supposed to take responsibility for the greater good. And in doing that, you have to look after women that are around you, and women that, blah, blah, blah. So I think a lot of men really drift through the world. I did a podcast last night, and I showed up, and they hadn't listened to what I was talking about before, and they didn't know where I was coming from. And you know what I mean? But because they're white guys, they just, hey, right, let's just do this. And I really get that attitude a lot from men of all stripes, that just showing up is pretty much the greatest effort they ever have to make. And so I think getting men engaged in this, I think also, and I know this is going to seem possibly counterintuitive, but with things being the way they are, which is in 2 months' time, this sort of free fall into autocracy and ghastliness that we haven't the slightest notion what's going to happen, other than we know it's not going to be great, is like Margaret said, she broke a couple up last night. And this is going to happen on a mass scale for the next 4 years. Even the women who voted to support the patriarchy, and I'm really not one of the comics who ranks on that a lot, whatever. Okay, white women blew it. That's nothing compared to what white men do. Like, you can never replace white men, in my mind, as the Simon Legree, Ebenezer Scrooges of the world. Our job is to destroy everything and make life awful for everyone. So, okay, so some white women let us down, whatever. What I'm getting at is, I think in the next 4 years, you're going to see women across the board confront men in a much bigger, broader way. And having lost 2 elections now to women who were not only qualified, but maybe the 2 best candidates that have ever stood for president in my lifetime. And that's no knock on Barack Obama. He was a wonderful president. He wasn't as qualified as Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. He was not. He was a junior type politician who got bumped up real fast. Biden, of course, had been there since time began. So yes, he did an awesome job. But so I'm sorry, I'm blathering now, but that's where I'm coming from. I feel like men really have to get their mind right about what's going to happen to them in the next 4 years, but also in the next 15 to 20 years, because the terrain's already been changed. And all the Elon Musks in the world can't put the genie back in the bottle.
I agree with that. I'm thinking now about all the Trump staffers who are going to come back and be subjected to living in the same apartment building like they were last time and crying because no one wants to date them in very liberal, progressive DMV, which is a very real thing. You can look that article up from the last administration. They literally complained that they could not get dates in DC while working for Trump. Boo-hoo. So I just kind of want to go to just final thoughts now. And this is for everybody to answer. Why is this film and approaching abortion access this way so important for people to see and also to share? And whoever wants to go first. I don't know, Liz, if you want to jump in first on that.
Sure. I think that so often in the women's rights movement, and especially the abortion rights movement, the only thing we've really ever been asked to do is march, and without any marching orders after that. And it simply is exhausting to gather and march if you don't know how to have a sustained way of being, so that, because the truth is, when Roe passed, people went like this: we're God. Mm-hmm. And it was never anything that was accessible to everyone. And I think that people need to understand that fighting for your humanity is not something that happens occasionally. It's something that you have to do all the time. Patriarchy doesn't take a holiday. It doesn't take a vacation. It just exists and lives and grows and breeds and is fed 24/7, 365, like the orcs feeding Sauron. I mean, that is what it is, right? It's just this bubbling cauldron of awful. And so how are we going to be in this? Means for me, when you watch this film, you learn that this is an organization that asks you, what is your capacity? What is your skill set? How often can you show up? And there's no wrong answers. If it's 15 minutes once a year, we can make that 15 minutes feel meaningful for you. And that's what I want this movement to be. I want this movement to be that. So That's why I think it's important, so that you can see yourself and ask yourself some questions so that you can be in it for the long haul. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Greg, and let Ruth finish it out, since Elizabeth
All
has
right.
off camera for a second.
I see. Well, I mean, we're talking about the picture now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the movement in general. Like, why see the movie and you will see yourself in it? That's what I say.
Yeah. I think people think that there's some sort of terrible, odious part-time job they have to take on by participating in society. And I think it's sort of, demystifying that or decriminalizing it or whatever to make it show like you don't have to do this 24 hours a day, every day of your life. You can participate in society when it's, when you can. And I think that a lot of people have time, but are busy looking at their phone or whatnot, and other fantastic activities. Obviously, loads of people have to work all day. They can't sit around in glitter jackets and pontificate. But yeah, I think, I don't know. If anything, I think there's going to be a screaming acceleration into this in the next 4 years. Maybe I'm optimistic. Right now is the doldrums and the depression and the anger and the denial and the appeasement and all that jazz. But I guarantee you in 2 years' time, it won't be like this at all. We'll either be on fire again, or this will be like the Warsaw Ghetto, and we'll be giving each other vegetable peelers and carving them into darts or whatever. And so I think it's a galvanizing time. I'd like to look at the good side because I don't sell doom and gloom. I really don't. And I'm not going to now. I was in Germany years ago and we met a baron. We were doing a documentary and we were at a winery. It was like a fun documentary. But in any case, he had been in the German army in World War II. He'd been a captain and the room went frozen cold. And he said to Jennifer, "What was your husband's name?" And she said, "Proops." And he went, "Ah." He was a captain in World War II. This was in 2006. He went, "I knew many Proops before the war." And so I think of that with what's going on now, and that there is going to be those kind of decisions to make. And I think are you going to fold or are you going to carry on? And part of being able to carry on is to latch onto something that you, like Liz said, that you can get meaning out of, that really is important. And that's the hands-on work of one day, any moment of helping women get the right to choose and control their own body again. It's so imperative. And I believe it'll happen. Not right this second.
Yeah.
Right.
And
But it will
what I do
happen.
want to say, yeah, and what I do want to say to everybody listening or that doesn't get it or our work, and that is, I'm somebody who decided to organize and make these plans and have this be my life so that other people could join in and do with me. So don't use me as an example that you need to be doing this 24/7, 365, but take solace in the fact that my joy and optimism and hope comes from being able to create all of these spaces while people are healing and having feelings and needing to step back, so that when you are ready to be in it, you are going to be offered a buffet of fucking ways to take down the evil forces that be, because that is it. That's what I'm doing. I'm creating the buffet. When you're hungry, you'll be able to come in and graze at it.
Love that.
Well, Liz and AAF have the buffet, and if we're ever going to fix and restore our democracy, we need to look at how it was taken down in the first place, through looking at what happened to abortion access and the dismantling of our bodily autonomy for decades. And then we all need to have a reckoning, which is, what can we do? What small or large thing can we do? Because everyone has to be a part of the fight and everyone has to get involved. No more sidelines. I think that's really like major takeaway, not just from obviously the film, but from where we are from 11/5. Like everyone has to do something. So
I think that's an excellent point that, as Liz and Greg and Ruth, you've all said, it's going to be a time for action. So we are in our depressive state, maybe, as Greg pointed out, but it's going to be time to work. And so that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our audience Q&A just to ask a few questions. I think we have time for at least a couple of questions here. And just thanks, guys, for the discussion. Was amazing. I do want to jump into one question here that I saw because it kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. This is interesting. It says, are you afraid or differently afraid right now? And what will you do to stay safe under Trump?
I'll start, I guess. I'm afraid, I'm always afraid about the same thing over and over and over again. Greg and I have been doing this work, exposing truth, bringing truth to expose, corruption and terrible people for 40 years, right? And my fear every time has always been when we get through and we let people know, will they still be inactive? So that has always been my fear, is what will people do? And I say it in the film, and I say it here now. So my biggest fear also is that the media, like I said before, will not understand the role it played and has played in destroying these women who ran for president, because you leave the clowning to the clowns and do your work. And I guess I'm also afraid of what I don't know, as far as all of the tricks that terrible people will try to enact, because we don't even know those tricks exist between the lines of some document that's there. The Comstock Act has been something, those kind of things can build up. But to stay safe, there's a myriad of things you can do. And I suggest to everyone, get familiar with Signal and use it as the way to communicate with people instead of texting. That's one thing you can do. Delete Me is a thing where you can get rid of some of your stuff on the internet, your privacy, if you want to be in the world and being an activist. Make sure that your address isn't on the internet. Get a service to do that. Make sure that your locations are off when you go places. Stock up on birth control and Plan B and medication abortion. And the one thing I'm going to say that's going to sound counterintuitive is live in the light. Be out there, be present. And if you're a person of privilege, use that privilege for those who are going to be the most affected by this administration and what it does. We have a whole training program. When we go out into the streets, it's white ladies to the front, and our brown and black sisters and allies, step back so you don't get arrested. Let us do that. So there's all kinds of things that you look at, but just don't be afraid, because that's what they want. They want us to be defeated, and they want us to be afraid, and instead be defiant and resilient, because your moral compass, and more importantly, theirs. So don't let theirs dictate to you, because it's broken. They don't have one. So.
And I don't know if anybody else wanted to address that question, but I have another one in the chat that I think would be an interesting one for you, Greg, if you wanted me to go ahead and read it out. Have you traveled out of the country in the last few years to see how international comics are interpreting American gender politics? And does anything stand out from your perspective?
Oh, I travel out of the country all the time. Well, I mean, it's a worldwide issue, what's going on now. It's not like France and England, as sophisticated as they are way ahead of us morally, or in any way rectifying the innate sexism and colonialism that they've bathed the world in. A lot of countries have a very good time making fun of us all the time and how racist we are. And then, of course, we have something like this election happen, and it just reconfirms everything that they already knew about us, and that anyone who's not a white person already knew about America, which is that it's really been the same since, I don't know, 1619, whatever arbitrary date you want to pick. So I think they have the insight of perspective in so much as they're not here. And the other thing I find about other countries around the world, even Canada, who I've been made fun of, they read more international news than we do. Your average Mexican person, your average Canadian person will actually know what's going on in other countries, where Americans really don't even know what's happening in their own neighborhood, much less anyone else. They don't know the capital of Mexico or the capital of Canada or anything like that. Americans are, and I think this election proved it, sort of drearily, dreadfully undereducated and not showing a lot of enthusiasm for it right now. So I think that's the other thing, is to kind of get people back to that fun, let's learn something, you guys. It's cool to be smart too. And I think that comes along with what Liz said, activating, and publicly, but also living in the light is also helping people, sort of anyone you can talk to. Like Jennifer is great at talking to everybody, and all of a sudden they're asking questions and they're in tuned and they're, you know what I mean? Where I'm better with a giant group because my ego works that way.
Well, thank you, Greg. I love that. What is your zodiac sign, Greg?
Libra, of course.
Ah, there you go.
I'm not gay, and I make no case for it.
I'm gonna throw the last Q&A question at Ruth, just to close us out here from the audience question and answer. Because you did a lot of this, as we said, you were weaving this so much throughout the documentary, but what made you want to fight fire with comedy in this documentary, and what surprised you? What surprised you along the way?
I felt like I needed to fight fire with comedy because after Trump was elected the first time, I really felt like I needed a lifeline, and that was the work that Liz and AAF do. I knew I was going to be going through it like everybody else in the country. I might as well make a film about it, and brings I wanted to make the film that nobody else was making about this issue. And so that was the fire with, fighting comedy with fire, or vice versa. And what was the other part? I've been on the road.
Was there anything that surprised you in the process?
I guess a little surprising is that when we were out pitching the film, going, hey, here's a new take on this, and we're following the people who know that this is all, that our rights are being eroded. Everyone in the industry was like, nothing's going to happen to Roe. So I guess I always give more credit to the audience than our industry does, and that's always reaffirmed all the time. That's not a great thing. It's a terrible thing, but we're undaunted by that because it's what we need to do. We do the work that the media doesn't do, and I think that's what we have to, for anybody out there who's a filmmaker, make the film that you really want to make. Make the film you want to make. Tell the story that you want to tell, because you're not going to find it. You got to make.
Too, it just affirms over and over and over again why representation matters and why diversity matters in decision making, because the audiences, the voters will tell you time and time again the truth of what people want. And when comedy club owners, politicians, consultants, network executives all have the same melanin and the same experience, they literally don't care what someone's telling you if they don't enjoy it themselves or don't experience it themselves. They just refuse to believe that it's true. They refuse to believe that abortion matters to people. They refuse to believe that this film would sell. They refuse to believe that women are funny. They refuse to believe that women are competent. They refuse to believe it constantly because, and this is the key, if women are competent or funny, or can govern or can have their own self-determination, they're out of a fucking job because they didn't earn it.
Bam.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the Well, thank you all so much. Just so many thanks to you, Ruth, for this wonderful documentary, Liz, for everything you've done with Abortion Access Front and your comedy and all the phenomenal things you do. To Greg, same, all of the comedy, the wonderful work you're doing in this space. Thank you to Margaret, who we know had to drop off, and just thank you all for joining us this evening and for your questions and just for being here, because it is a really important topic to discuss. And so just a reminder that No One Asked You, you can watch it on Jolt, and also keep an eye out for any screenings that are going to happen in your location by following them on Instagram. And I will now pass it back to Melinda.
Thank you
so much, everybody. On behalf of everyone here today, thank you so much to our participants for this engaging and inspiring conversation. This recording will be available at a later date for you to share and watch again, so please be on the lookout for an update from Jolt. If this film or conversation has moved you, we invite you to spread the word. We have dropped a social kit in the chat, so please help share and widen the circle of friends, this community of supporters. As Elizabeth mentioned, the film is available. No One Asked You is available on Jolt right now through December 29th. So please tell all your friends about this incredibly important film. Thank you to our amazing hosts, and thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful night.